We take a look at the players that Ole Miss might bring in the transfer portal, the needs they have post-spring. That, and we will look at the holes of each quarterback's game and what they need to improve on in order to win the quarterback job this fall. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I am your host, Stephen Willis, and thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, your team, every day. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Ole Miss is going into the transfer portal, the window that opened up on Saturday and goes through April 30th with an opportunity to bring players in that fit their scheme. Now, what players, or what type of players, I should say, would Ole Miss be looking at bringing in? Because this is what you have around Ole Miss at the moment. You have people that no matter what the position, Ole Miss needs one more. It's the ones you hear all the time. It's like Ole Miss needs one more running back. Well, you can only play three. And I don't think you necessarily have to do that with the workload that Quinshawn is going to have. So I think you can easily get away with two, but you're going to have three, and then Fred McAfee and Matt Jones. Yep, that's what I'm talking about. There's people that's always going to say you need one more. There's two positions on the field that Ole Miss always needs one more. Everybody in the SEC needs one more. And that is an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman become available. Ole Miss should and probably will take them if they are good enough to make the roster. There's a offensive lineman out of Wyoming. It's like Emmanuel Pratnam or something. If I'm mispronouncing the name, I apologize. He's already got an offer from Ole Miss, so this is moving fairly quickly. Several teams have offered him. He was the third team All Mountain West player. He has 3 years of eligibility. So there's going to be all kinds of people trying to get into the game for him. So offensive line is obviously an area that Ole Miss will look. Defensive line, I think they're okay. I think that until real football gets played, you're not going to be able to tell they're okay. But there's players that are going to get at it through recruiting. And whenever you look at spring and you're making rush decisions about players that need to be brought in, that completely discounts the fact that players are being brought in already. Jamarius Brown's coming in to play defensive line. DJ Holmes over at the jack position. Chamberlain Campbell, the jack position. Centarian Perkins at linebacker. Those type players is very interesting. But I do think some of the former players that were recruited to the 326 that are kind of clunky fits have led to a need to where other players need to be recruited. So I'm going to say, just as a whole, pretty much one player at each position group is needed in the spring transfer portal defensively because of the clunky style fits. There's rumors, I think it was on Ole Miss Spirit that Braxton Myers may be looking to get out of here. I don't know. I haven't heard anything like that, but that rumor's out there. And the reason I say that is because players coming in is often going to be because of players going out. It just kind of is what it is. Braxton Myers is a player that was recruited to the 326 by Chris Partridge. He probably didn't gel with the coaches that are there now. It just happens. It is what it is. There are going to be people concerned and overly concerned about the player exodus. And yes, I can understand a situation like what Texas A&M is going through right now where that would be a bad thing. But if your system changes, and exodus is a good thing. If you have players that are recruited for a certain way, if they know what they are and they're able to get out of Dodge, they're going to free up roster spots to allow you to hit the transfer portal to bring up players that you think will fit your system. I'm really interested to see about DJ Holmes. The jack position is a must position for me in the spring. Jameer Lewis, I didn't hear his name one time in the spring game. And like I said, we don't do scheme, we don't do stats necessarily, and we never do the score on the spring game. That kind of stuff doesn't matter. It's like going out there and watching one-on-one drills for 40 or 50 plays. That's essentially the extent of the spring game. But I did not hear Jameer Lewis's name once, the linebacker Jack out of Southwest Community College. DJ Holmes is coming into that position in the fall. Chamberlain Campbell is coming in on that position in the fall. Maybe Cedric Johnson will play that position in the fall when he comes back from surgery. Like I said, this defense this year has a chance to be clunky. Everybody needs to be ready for that. It has a chance to actually be clunky. And because of that, you got some growing pains you go through. Year 1 to year 2, there's always a big growth, but we'll see exactly what this team can do with it. I'm actually looking forward to the defense. Like I said, we watched UTSA's 2017, 2016. I forget the years exactly. I think that was it. But their defense under Pete Golding was attacking. They played in the backfield. They did a really good job. Now, the offense was an old-style formation. It was straight David Cutcliffe's playbook, Chris Selfo's playbook from the late 90s, early 2000s. It just is what it is. So that protected the defense a little bit. So we'll have to see what the tempo that we're going to be playing with, how much tempo that defense can take. It is a learning curve. It just absolutely is. But the 3 positions that I think Ole Miss should really focus on in the transfer portal in the spring over the next couple of weeks is offensive line, Jack, defensive line, defensive end linebacker, somebody that fits that role, and probably a defensive back because of rumors floating around. And we'll see exactly how that looks and everything to do with that over the next coming weeks. It's a short window. We have, let's see, by the time you watch this, we're going to have like 13 days left or something, 12 days left. So it's really getting into fish or cut bait territory for Ole Miss football in this one. But we'll see exactly what happens in the transfer portal and who is available, who is coming, things like that. Anyway, I do want to let you know that coming up in the next segment, we're going to be talking about the biggest flaws of each of the quarterbacks on Ole Miss's roster. It's not like I'm for, there's fans of these quarterbacks all over the place, but as you guys know, as my everydayers know, that is not me. I literally just call what I see. I root for laundry. That's what it is. So I will tell you what each of the flaws that each player has to overcome to win the starting quarterback job this fall, which I think is pretty interesting because there's a couple of facts that you've heard and there's probably 1 or 2 that you might not have on this show. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Anyway, I do want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays are back, and there's no better place to get on the MLB action than FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Now, I realize in Mississippi, you have to go to a brick-and-mortar casino to gamble, but if you go to Louisiana, if you go to Tennessee, both states that border Mississippi, if my McGee, Mississippi geography is correct, go to New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Shreveport, even across the river in Delta, Louisiana. If you hit Memphis, Tennessee, Jackson, Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, a road trip over to Knoxville or Gatlinburg, you can catch it there as well. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up, place your first bet, and get that $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. So don't miss on your chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel is an official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow on the show, you can look forward to Bill Flowers. He's going to be talking Grove Bowl. All this week and all of our guests, it's going to be a very Grove Bowl-centric week. And we're going to talk about their impressions and what they thought of and what this is telling them about where we could go into the fall. It is an important data point that it shouldn't be overlooked, and we are going to treat the Grove Bowl with a measure of respect and see what we can learn. We're going to cover it from all angles, and I guarantee you we're going to hit the storylines that are pretty much relevant come this fall, so we'll see exactly how that goes. Anyway, The quarterback competition at Ole Miss, Jaxson Dart, Spencer Sanders, and Walker Howard. All three quarterbacks are either much improved or really good. I'm really impressed with how much Jaxson Dart has improved. But all three still have holes in their games. And they're holes that need to be cleaned up before fall if they want to win the job. And that is why this is important. We are going to drill down on some of these flaws moving forward. We talked about during the spring a lot of the positives that each one would bring. So you guys are familiar about that. But the flaws are probably going to be what determines the outcome of this job. Okay? And there's certain things that are pretty important. And we'll start with Jaxson Dart because right now he's the number one quarterback. If you ask me to rank quarterbacks right now after spring, it's Walker Howard, Spencer Sanders, and Jaxson Dart, Spencer Sanders, and Walker Howard. That is the three. And I don't think Walker Howard will be the third string quarterback, but I think that's the ranking for the starting quarterback. When I give it a ranking, it's for the starters. That's not a depth chart projection. Okay? So Jaxson Dart has a major flaw in his game that has developed over the last 12 regular season games, bowl game, and really 2 spring games. And that is his inability to use the middle of the field. And I will harp on this forever. Our everydayers are just completely tired of me doing this because I harp on it all the time. I got it from Bill Flowers. He turned me on to it. And now I can't unsee it. It's just a major problem and a major hole in this offense. Now, when you look at this offense tortures linebackers. I've said that for 3 years at this point. This offense tortures linebackers. It causes false steps up to the jet sweep, to the inside zone play, to the tight end running in behind you. Those type things mean they can't be right. And whenever the offense is clearly clicking, you're getting big plays because the linebacker is creating false steps. The deception of the offense is working. We're not even talking about the line blocking in different directions and all that stuff. We're just going to keep this simple for now and just mention the jet sweep, the zone play, and the tight end over the middle of the field. Those 3 things work in unison to kind of pull the defense apart. It's a situation where if it's done right, the safety cannot drop deep whenever their rule is be deeper than the deepest. They can't go too far deep because that opens up so much space behind the linebackers who's taken a false step to the jet sweep or the inside zone play. That's the reason there's a play action pass nearly every pass. So it is designed to affect linebackers. So this offense becomes less and less effective when all of a sudden that is taken out. When linebackers, all they have to do is deal with Quinshawn, who's a heck of a running back. Any other running back could be a problem for the run game, but Quinshawn's a heck of a running back. And because of that, they're able to tee off. Like I said, Mississippi State had like 15 tackles for loss. Texas Tech had like 13 tackles for loss. It was because they didn't have to worry about the middle of the field, other than the inside zone play, other than Quinshawn. And when we ran a 4th and 1, they knew exactly what we were going to do because they didn't have to worry about taking a false step. It was pretty cut and dry. We weren't jet sweeping and we wasn't using the middle of the field. So that is the major hole in Jaxson Dart's game. He needs to fix that. Using the middle of the field. You have Michael Trigg, who is probably the 2nd most athletic tight end in the Southeastern Conference. He has a chance to be an All-American level player. Caden Priestcorn, number 7 tight end coming out by Pro Football Focus. I am Team 12 personnel, but to do that, the middle of the field has to become a thing. So Jaxson Dart needs to work over the next few weeks to try and figure out how to use the middle of the field more within this offense. Do the 2 things. You're not turning the ball over. Absolutely fantastic. We were asked you not to do that. And you're getting the ball out of your hands. You're absolutely doing that as well. We need that 3rd thing from you. If you do that, this job's yours, honestly. Nobody's going to mess with you. But that is the step that Jaxson needs to take. Spencer Sanders' big hole is tends to get a little loose with accuracy on passes. You saw that during the Grove Ball. Pass down the sideline, he underthrew it a little bit, went off a helmet, got picked off. That can be a problem for you. You know the pluses of Spencer Sanders, but his accuracy is an issue. And if you talk to Lane Kiffin about what he looks for in quarterbacks, accuracy is a part of it. So you need to be an accurate thrower of the football, which he can be. He can get a little loose at times. He's that pitcher that has a tendency to get a little bit wild. He's that guy. But if he can lock in and do what he needs to do, his athleticism, especially when Ole Miss starts playing real football, could be a difference maker. But his accuracy absolutely has to be cleaned up a little bit. He played fine. He was probably the player of the game in the spring game. But so was Devin Thomas. So it's a spring game. We're going to talk about that in the next segment, about what you need to take out of a spring game. So we will see about accuracy with Spencer Sanders. That one concerns me a little bit because accuracy isn't something that changes in like year 6 of college. You kind of are what you are. So you have one that depends on whether or not he can see linebackers, because if he can't, then the turnovers could go up as well. You know, that's not good for Jaxson. But on the other side, you have an accuracy problem that could lead to turnovers as well. And we've told you many times, Lane Kiffin abhors turnovers. Everything. It will give him an aneurysm turning over the football. He absolutely abhors it. Lastly, Walker Howard. And this is a big deal. And this is something I think everybody needs to pay attention to and understand what's going on. Everybody saw the spring game and saw how talented Walker Howard was. Go back to my Twitter timeline during the game. I talked about how talented Walker Howard was. So, saying that, I say that to say this. The one thing and the one hole in Walker Howard's game is experience. And he's not going to get that before the Mercer game. Now, during the Mercer game, he's going to play. He'll get a little bit of experience. And I think he'll have a chance to play in a mop-up role 4, 5, or 6 times during the year. Because remember, he does not have a redshirt year to use. So he can be used over and over and over again. But that experience that he needs, that he absolutely has to have, can only be picked up by playing the position. But you're not going to trust him to just play the position until he gets it, which means in a mop-up role, I think you're going to see Walker Howard pretty consistently. If Ole Miss is up by 14 points, 21 points in the fourth quarter, I think they're going to pull the trigger early and bring Walker Howard into the game, getting him ready for 2024. Because I've explained to everybody, my everydayers all know this. This is the way I picture this quarterback position going this year. I think number one, the starting quarterback, QB1, will be the winner of Jaxson Dart and Spencer Sanders. Whoever wins that race will be the QB1. Quarterback 2 is going to be Walker Howard, and whoever loses the race will be the third string quarterback. I know it doesn't sound like it makes sense, but whoever loses that job is going to be unhappy anyway. If you have a redshirt year, they're going to want a redshirt like Luke Altmaier did last year. Like if for some reason Jaxson Dart lost this job this fall, they would redshirt him so that he wouldn't lose a year of eligibility so he could go somewhere else and play. But Spencer Sanders, he has one bullet in the gun. I don't know what he's going to do if he loses this job. I'm telling you, this is just an absolutely wacky situation. There's really no way around it. It just really is. And these three are pushing each other. They're all three talented. It's going to be fun. It's going to be an extremely dramatic fall camp. And I am going to be talking about the same issue that I've talked about for 2 years. It just is what it is. But remember what I told you before fall camp. Jaxson Dart was going through a situation like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Him against Keaton Slovis as a freshman. That was him like against Piston Honda and Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Him against Luke Altmaier, like Bald Bull. Now, Super Macho Man. He is working his way up through the game to get to where he needs to be. This might be Mike Tyson. I don't know. We'll have to see exactly how this quarterback competition goes. But each year, the competition level has gone up and up and up. It's worth paying attention to. Anyway, stay tuned as we do What You Talking About, Willis, and we talk about spring games and my opinion on spring games right after this. Stick around. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell for notifications, comment down below, and upvote the video itself. We would appreciate it. In this week's episode of What You Talking About, Willis, we talk about spring games, specifically spring games, not necessarily spring practice, because I think we need to differentiate spring practice from spring game in the importance area. Now, I think the spring game, as it sits in inter-squad scrimmage, has lost all of its meaning. It means absolutely nothing. Used to, back in the day, 1985, 1995, when everything wasn't on TV, the spring game was your opportunity to see football during the spring. You go up there, you sit in the stadium, it's relatively warm outside. You watch some players that are coming back, and you get that little fix that you needed to make yourself go until football season. But now, in the age of everything being on TV, that becomes less of an option because they don't tailgate in the Grove for the spring game. They just go to the scrimmage and watch what's going on. It doesn't have the same meaning as a fall Saturday in Oxford, Mississippi. So, if the game's on ESPN Plus, you watch it on ESPN Plus. That's what I did. There's no reason to absolutely go to the game, and honestly, no benefit for Ole Miss to have it because it's free admission at that point. It used to be like $5 back whenever I went to school. But now it's completely free admission because they're trying to get people in the stadium. Now, Lane Kiffin is the master. We're going to shift gears a little bit here. Is the master of taking a spring game and making it to where you can't really take anything from it. He aligns the rules in such a way that whenever you try to break it down, it's almost impossible to do. He's did that for the first 2 years by essentially making the whole wide receiver unit non-contact. It just is what it is. This year he did it by completely making the defense toothless, and don't do any opinions on the defense at this point because the rules were completely against him. 3 base defenses were called, like no blitzes except for the last play. I do like that they zero blitz the last play. And everybody knew exactly what was coming. Okay. So that he is a master of doing that because he knows it's on TV, but he needs to get work out of it. And there's things that we can take from the game other than the fact the score. I do not even know what the score is of the game. Score was of the game. I just don't. It's just not important. It's not a real thing to me. It's not how I work. I think it needs to be understood that both teams were relatively evenly broken up, okay? And Jackson, Spencer, and Walker kind of was going against the same looks, if that makes sense. Now, the matchup problem of Michael Trigg at tight end, that's a little bit of a problem, but Spencer Sanders used the middle of the field, if you heard what we talked last section. He had the pass of the day doing just that. So whenever you go like comparatively to what's going on, I think there's a little bit of relevance that you can take from that. Other than that, it is essentially a 2-hour one-on-one period to where you're looking at offensive lineman and defensive lineman, you're looking at wide receiver and cornerback, tight end and safety and linebacker, running back and linebacker. All of those things are sitting in. You can look at the accuracy of the quarterback. You can look at how he is reading the defense, not necessarily the progression, but you can understand like if they're not using a certain segment of the field. That is how you watch a spring game. That is how that gets to be important. That is why this game is probably more meaningful as essentially a 15th practice But the game itself honestly doesn't need to really happen. The game's just there to get that fix, and you could still do that. And I think it was Hugh Freeze that talked about after his spring game, it would be better if they could just play somebody. And I think that is kind of the future of the spring game, because as it sits right now in the stadium, it's kind of a non-factor. It just is. There's going to be people that go and there's going to be people that do that, but it's just a non-factor. The result of the game doesn't matter. All of these things and all of these, prefixes essentially have to be taken into account for this game. It's like, hey, this person played a good game at quarterback, but this person played a good game at wide receiver, but we can't really judge the defense because they weren't allowed to tackle to the ground. Stuff like that. If you play somebody in a real game at the end of spring, it doesn't have to be necessarily a good team. Have UT Martin come down here. Have Southern Miss come up here. Have Jackson State come up here. If you do that, that will serve as a better benchmark for your team. You can actually get a view of how offense and defense kind of works going into the fall. And I understand that they want to be secretive, and most of the time they're right, but Lane Kiffin is running the same offense he's run at Ole Miss for 4 years. There's tape on it. The spring game's not going to make any difference. It's just not. Pete Golding's been coaching Alabama defense for 5 years. Everybody has been trying to break down that defense. They have an idea of what they do. We're going to do the same thing. It's not necessarily state secrets. I understand why they do it, but it just kind of is what it is. But if you played a real team and you play a real game, all of a sudden you can get an idea of where your holes really are. See, that's the catch in spring practice. You're doing a lot of thud. You're doing a lot of just basically essentially two-hand touch. There's not so much full contact that happens because you don't want to get your players hurt. So if you had one game to where you just rotated in and out, everybody got 25 plays, you played the whole roster against an FCS team, you could see where your holes on your roster likely would be before the spring transfer portal window. And you could pay these FCS schools the money that they would get for coming up here in the fall, and they could be removed from the fall schedule. They still get the money. You still get to help football out. You don't have to play them during the season, which absolutely drives us crazy, especially the teams that play an FCS team like the second week in November. It's just an absolute pain. But as it sits now, whenever the scheduling gets turned over, I'm fully expecting FCS, G5, Power 5 to remain on the schedule. The lesser buyout of the two Power 5 or group of 5 teams that are scheduled every year, that is the team that is going to get dropped. It just is what it is. So I'm pretty excited. I mean, you could probably hear from the tone of my voice, but spring games need to be taken with the respect that they give. They are honestly not needed as an event. They're a relic of a bygone era as an event. They are relevant in the fact that those practices are relevant. And in order for players to hit where they want to be and where they need to be going into the fall, spring is necessary to do that. Otherwise, you're dealing with like 9 months taking time off, and it would take a whole lot of time, whole lot of extra time to get kind of ready to go. But spring games, I would like to see it evolve to be basically FCS teams. Spring games as it sits now, kind of useless. Doesn't matter. I want to ever ask score. I don't care about stats, and I don't care about attendance. All I care about are essentially one-on-one games that are happening on the field. And spring practices are unbelievably important because they serve as the point to pick the holes on your roster before the spring transfer portal window and to find out exactly what you have before the new class comes in. It's important. It's the development practices. It is where the kid that might not have been able to get on the field last year can work his way in to where in the fall he's working towards the rotation. It's the Latimer practices. If anybody watched the program. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Every dayers tomorrow on the show, Bill Flowers will join us to talk about this game. I have an idea what he's going to say. I'm not 100% positive what's going to happen, but we'll be able to see exactly what he does. Tune in for that. But until tomorrow, thank you very much and have a good day.